Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen. A very special episode this week, none other than my former co-host and, of course, friend, Joe's Professional Wrestling Talk Show, Joe's Hardcore Wrestling Talk Show, Jason Botelho, the Riverside legend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Pleasure to be here. Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation. It's been a long time since we've talked wrestling, so looking forward to it.
Without a doubt, yeah, and it's good to have you here, and we'll, let's go way back. We met in 1996, Riverside Junior High. 1998, we started doing. Well, actually, I should say late '96, we started doing the pay-per-view parties, and that was a big thing back in the day for people to get together for pay-per-views. Now there's the streaming services; anybody can watch it at any moment that they want to, But back in the day, you had one person getting the pay-per-view and everybody wanted to make sure not to miss it. And that way, each person wouldn't have to spend $30-$40. So what are your memories of, early pay-per-view get-togethers with friends and stuff like that?
Yeah, they were great times. I remember we'd all kind of chip in $5, order the pay-per-view. It was a good opportunity for all of us to get together and kind of share our passion, our love of wrestling. And of course there was some legendary surprise appearances at a few of those parties, people that you didn't know they were going to be there, that showed up, and it was, you never knew what you were going to get, and it was always a good time. And that was really really good period, a really good period in pro wrestling. It really was a hot time, probably, in my opinion, probably the best 3 or 4 year run of our lifetime. But that's just my opinion.
I was going to ask you was your favorite era in pro wrestling. So obviously for you, the Attitude Era.
I would say the Attitude Era, yeah, for sure. That was, I know it's kind of the common answer. I also like the old, my first probably memory in life was WrestleMania 3 back in 1987. But I do remember like the early 90s WCW pay-per-views. I don't know if you remember like the like Wrestle War 91, War Games, the Halloween Havoc with the elimination of the chamber there, the Chamber of Horrors, Halloween Havoc. I think that was like 92 maybe. We have Duel the Butcher getting electrocuted. So I like the old early 90s era, but I'd say the Attitude Era overall was, you couldn't beat that. You never knew what you were going to get every week, and every Monday night was just must watch.
And were you more so a WWF guy, WCW guy? Were you flipping back and forth?
Definitely back and forth flipping. WWE guy at heart, WWF guy at heart, but there was that period of time when WCW was really hot with the NWO and Nitro just took off, and it was for a while, I think it was superior to Raw, and then eventually the tables turned and we're at where we're at now. But I definitely went back and forth for sure.
Now let's talk about that NWO period. 1996, Scott Hall comes out of the crowd on Nitro. What was your initial reaction? Did you watch that live? Did you hear about it first? Kind of walk us through that moment.
I watched it live. Yeah, I watched it live because I remember the match. It was a terrible match that maybe it was like Mike Enos or somebody. It was a really random match that Scott Hall made his first appearance on. And I, what were we, 14, 15 years old? I'm just like, what, what's going on here? Is this part of, I didn't know if it was part of the show, if this was some sort of a stunt by WWE to, with the Monday Night Wars to keep that moving, or I had no idea what to expect. And that, every week they kind of revealed a little more. And then of course the Bash at the Beach was where it all culminated. And that was, I still think that's the most shocking moment in the history of pro wrestling, hands down.
Now the lead into that pay-per-view, who was your choice? Who did you think was going to be the third man?
So
did you have a guess?
I thought, I remember at the time, I thought possibly Sting. I know it because that was, this was a different time. You didn't have all the Twitter, you had rumor hotlines and things to call, but you didn't have the constant rumor mill spreading. So I really had no idea. Maybe another WWF guy coming over. Definitely did not have Hulk Hogan on the radar at all. And I don't know if Bobby Heenan did either, but judging by his reaction when Hogan came down, he kind of like blew the surprise a little bit. Maybe, I don't know, maybe he didn't know. I don't know, but great event, and that was just one of those moments that was just always sticks with you. Throwing the beer can and the soda and the popcorn from the crowd being thrown at Hall and Nash and Hogan kind of laying into Mean Gene. It was just that was one of my favorite moments, and definitely the most shocking moment for sure.
That same year, you'd have NWO Sting. Basically, he was imposter Sting. He was actually a WCW talent. He wrestled as Cobra. And what are your thoughts on that time period? Like, did you think at that time that was the real Sting, or did you not? Did you?
No, I knew it wasn't the real Sting. I felt like they kind of dragged the Sting storyline out a little too long, where you really didn't get much. It was just, you got him end of Nitro, you should, go up to the rafters, you see him up in the rafters, but that was a really slow burn, which I don't think you could pull that off now. I don't think you could drag that out now for that length of time without people. I don't think people have the attention span for that anymore. But yeah, I remember the old Cobra, the old NWO Sting, a little bit chubbier, a little bit not chubbier, but a little bit of a different build than Steve Borden for sure. So awesome. NWO, at some point it got a little bit, oversaturated once you started getting 15, 16 members, kind of like Don Callis family of the late 90s. But it was also, it was awesome, great surprises, and it was just a great time, great time to be a fan.
And flipping over to the other channel, the other side of things, the Attitude Era for WWF specifically, what were some of your favorite moments, some of your favorite storylines going on in WWF?
So definitely the Brian Pillman gun angle, if you remember that, when Steve Austin came to his house, it was wild with the gun, and then the camera fades, you don't know what happened. That was really cool. I love the kind of Mick Foley getting an opportunity to be a main event guy, and the Dude Love, the Cactus Jack, all that stuff. And then the original DX, the Sean Hunter and China and Rick Rude, for that matter, the original DX was great. They really pushed the envelope. Again, I don't think even on Netflix, I don't know if they would kind of touch some of that stuff nowadays, but at that late 90s time, it was the Wild West. It was a free for all, and WWF was trying to outdo WCW, WCW trying to outdo WWF, and the fans benefited. That's why one thing I don't understand now is when you get these fans that are very tribalistic, AEW or WWE, and it's like, well, the more wrestling, the better, because they force the other companies to step their game up and produce a better product. I think you saw that a few years ago with WWE when AEW first came out, and you got the Bloodline and all that stuff. You had a few really hot years there between WrestleMania 39 and 41. So I think the competition, it's good. It makes everybody step their game up, and it gives more people a chance to make a paycheck too in the wrestling business, which is a good thing.
We were talking a few days ago off camera, and I remember you kind of unlocked a key memory with trivia. Why don't you bring up some of the wrestling trivia that would go on back in the day?
So this is before the days of cell phones. You had the house phone, attached to the wall, and Joe would, I say maybe once or twice a week, he would there was a crew of us that were into wrestling, probably 8 to 10 people that were really into it. This is, that late 90s period. And Joe would make up a wrestling trivia, basically 10 questions. And he would call each of us, and whoever got the most questions right would be the winner for the week. I'm a competitive guy, so I feel like I knew my stuff back then. So I did fairly well with it, but I always enjoyed it. I remember just kind of like sitting on the bed of my parents' room, because that's where we had the house phone, and answering the questions, and you get 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. There was a couple of guys I was always competitive with, because it was usually the same guys were at the top of the ranks. But it was always fun, because I love trivia and Jeopardy and things like that. So that was always a fun time before the days of cell phones, and it was great.
You remember the journal line?
2777777. Yeah, yes.
Get all your news and rumors on there,
Yeah, I couldn't get my parents' permission to call Mean Gene at the WCW hotline, so I had to settle for the Pro Joe.
Oh man, poor Scheme Gene. And when it comes to pay-per-view parties, obviously, most of the pay-per-view parties I would host, but I remember going to your house specifically for Breakdown in your house, 1998. It was a rare opportunity to have a pay-per-view somewhere else. Often there'd be like maybe one at yours, one at Justin Fournier's house, and one here, but obviously primarily I would just kind of get them all, but at that time, what was your favorite pay-per-view, WWF, WCW, any particular one?
Oh boy, a specific one from that era. That's a good one. I liked Survivor Series '96. I believe it was '96 where it was Brett versus Austin, not the submission Brett versus Austin match, but it was Brett and Austin. I think Brett kind of was in a sleeper hold and he kind of crawled up to the second rope and did a little rolled over Austin and kind of pinned the shoulders down for like a quick 3 count. So it was a victory, but not a decisive victory. That was one of my favorites. I just looking back when you watch this stuff now, I didn't really appreciate Bret Hart, I don't think, as much as I should have back as a kid. And then you watch him now and you see all his matches and the way everything kind of connected. It made sense. It looked good. When he took that shot into the turnbuckle, he took it chest, face first and fell to the ground. It's just more realistic the way he moved. And of course, as he likes to mention, he never hurt anybody and made it look, made it look real. And so some of those Bret matches, Bret and Austin, Bret and Shawn, and then when he was part of the Canadian faction, I thought that was his best character work, on the microphone when he did the Hart family with Pillman, Owen, and Davey, and Bret. I think that was a fun time. I thought Bret was awesome. You get to see a different side of Bret Hart that you didn't normally see, and getting cheered in Canada, booed in the States. I thought that was really cool. It was different, for sure.
Yeah. Survivor Series '96, Madison Square Garden. That was always a special pay-per-view to me. The hype going in, the atmosphere of the pay-per-view, it was just a special event. It had a special feel. It felt different. It had a different theme song for the pay-per-view because for a while they were using the same song every year for Survivor Series. So I don't know. It just felt new. It felt fresh. You had Psycho Sid, Shawn Michaels for the championship. Yep. You had Mankind and Undertaker with Paul Bearer in the shark cage. Yep. You had, like you said, Stone Cold and Bret Hart. And then you had the great Survivor Series matches, which I was always a fan of. Some people don't like them, but I prefer, if they could fill up most of the card with those random teams, I love it. Especially when they're each getting full entrances and you're seeing all these different characters. And, it was like Jerry Lawler and Triple H and Goldust and Crush as a team.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then you had like Farouk and Vader and Fake Razor and Fake Diesel and
yep.
It was just a special night. We saw lots of returns too. Jake the Snake and Jimmy Snuka and some surprises. Yokozuna was there. Just a really cool show.
And I used to like the way that the Garden. They used to have remember they had the short rampway to the. It was like a different kind of different view of the action. The camera, the runway was right in front of where the camera was, and it was a very short kind of runway to the ring, which I just liked the different setup. It give it a unique feel, which the Garden's the biggest venue there is. So you knew you were watching an event at the Garden when you saw the short entranceway there, and just made it a little bit different, made it cool.
And for those watching now that are seeing you for the first time, they don't know you from the talk show or whatever it may be, or they're not, personal family or friends. Why don't you tell us all about your childhood, growing up, your hobbies? Tell us all about Jay Botelho.
Okay, yeah. So I'm born and raised in Riverside, like Joe. Didn't have a ton of hobbies, but the hobbies that I had, I was really into. So I was really into sports, really into the Patriots. Pro wrestling was huge. Hanging out with friends. We had a good, I know you remember, we had a good kind of group of friends, and it was, I don't know if it's like this in every town, but you had all different kinds of friends, different groups of friends that you'd hang out with, but everybody at the end of the day, we were all, we were all had each other's back, and it didn't matter if you belonged to which crew you hung out with or whatever. We were all townies, I guess, for lack of a better word. And I thought it was a great place to grow up. I had a lot of friends, and it's, like an example, someone like you that, you can go years without seeing them, but then you see them and you just kind of pick up right where you left off. I've seen people, I'll run into somebody at Dunkin' Donuts I haven't seen in 15, 20 years, and it's just like no time has passed. And I think that's a cool thing about Riverside and about East Providence is that kind of that sense of community, because a lot of people that live here stay here, and then they raise their families, and it's cool to see, friends now from back then, right, with their kids, and their kids are friends with each other, and it's just a cool thing for sure.
And I remember, your brother Jeff was big into wrestling for a while there early on. How about your parents or any other relatives? Anybody else in the family into wrestling?
Yeah, the reason I remember, like I said, WrestleMania 3, my oldest memory, like in life, was because my dad and my uncle, they had ordered it. We had we had the basement, like a kind of like a done over basement with like the TV, the bar, and all that. And I remember them. It was like a late afternoon event, ordering that, and so that was my first introduction to wrestling. And then I just was hooked immediately. So my dad wasn't like a huge fan, but for some reason he ordered that event for whatever reason, and my uncle. And that's what got me hooked. But no, it was just mostly friends. Like, it was like me, Jimmy Madden. We all we enjoyed it. We watched it together, and it was cool. And then like the thing about that Attitude period, like the Steve Austin era, the Attitude era, is for a while it wasn't exactly the coolest thing to be into wrestling. But then all of a sudden, when Austin comes out and he's doing his thing with the bear and the flipping people off, it you started seeing the T-shirts in school, the Austin 316, and it was like a phenomenon that people that you never would have thought like wrestling, or you never talked to them about wrestling before, now all of a sudden they're in. And that's why I think that's such an important time period, because it really brought it to the mainstream again, like it was back in the Hogan era of the late 80s. I think it brought new eyeballs to it, and it made it kind of part of pop culture. So
yeah,
it was great. Yeah.
And I remember you said, obviously, like you said, there have been special appearances at some of the pay-per-views. Obviously, teachers. Ed Daft was there from social studies, and Mr. Stringfellow from health, and you never know who you were going to get at these pay-per-view parties. So I
thought that was the cool. When Mr. Daft showed up, I thought that was like, I always thought he was the coolest guy to begin with. Like, because he was a younger teacher, and he was just a great guy. And when he showed up there, I was like, that was the talk of Riverside Junior High the next day, that Mr. Daft was there, and he was awesome. I think he had the NWO T-shirt on, and he's one of my I would consider him a role model growing up. He's the one. I went to school to become a history teacher. Long story short, didn't pan out, but I'm back now finishing my degree in history, and he's kind of the one that got me interested in that as a subject. And I love history, and I was lucky to have some really good, I don't know if you remember the junior high, some really good history teachers at the junior high, also at the high school, but Mr. Christie and Mr. Daff were definitely the two that got my love for history started, by having those two as teachers. And those were two men that I looked up to in life, for sure, two role models.
And did you have Mr. Stringfellow for health, or did you have a different?
I did, yes. Yeah, Mr. String for health. Yeah, he was a good guy too. I kind of forgot him being there for some reason. I forgot him being there. Because I remember talking about wrestling with Mr. Daft in class and stuff like that, but I didn't remember Mr. Stringfellow. But yeah, I remember health. He had that health. I remember exactly where his classroom was located within the junior high, kind of right out by the main hallway there. And he was a good guy. I think he still coaches the East Providence football team, I believe.
He does, yeah.
He's a good guy, and good member of the community. His family, actually, his family's very involved. Has always been involved in the community. They're good people. So yeah, it was great. It was great for them to show up and just to give us some extra time and get to see him in a different set. You see him in a different setting, and I thought it was cool. And of course, I don't know. I think we talked. I said this the other day, or you said it, but there was always this Mr. Daft British Bulldog. They looked like a similarity. They reminded me of each other. Yeah, the Mr. Daft and the British Bulldog. So they always reminded me of each other, and those were great times. But that was awesome when they showed up there. That was really cool of them to do.
Yeah, Mr. String was a big wrestling fan, like Mr. Daft was, and I remember he would call himself the man called String instead of Sting, and he would actually do the Sting call in the hallway all the time. And I remember that we had this big test coming up in health, and he kept pumping up about how important this one was. You really need to study it up, and the test starts. He's about to pass out the papers. He doesn't even pass out the papers. He puts Starrcade 97 into the VCR, and we start watching WCW pay-per-view. I'll never forget that.
Was that the infamous Sting versus Hogan
yes,
Starrcade, where Sting somehow didn't win? I guess he wasn't tan enough or something. Yeah.
Huge build-up, and then they didn't even know what they wanted to do.
Yeah. Is that true that that Bischoff said he wasn't tan enough, or that he didn't want to put the belt on Sting because he wasn't tan enough, or wasn't in good enough shape, or something like that?
I had heard that
just
too.
A Hogan decision.
I highly doubt that was true. Yeah, it was probably some type of Hogan. Sign of my contract, brother.
It doesn't work for me.
Yeah, exactly. Now let's talk real quick. Some wrestling facts. So who were some of your favorite factions, favorite entrance music, and favorite tag team in wrestling?
Okay, so Ooh, favorite faction? I gotta go with the Four Horsemen, just because Ric Flair was he was so cool when he was wearing the suits, and there wasn't, you didn't see as many guys behind the mic doing the promos back then as you do now. So he was kind of like rare, where he could just talk, and you felt like he was the actual character that he was in Nature Boy. And then I love the fact that he had Arn Anderson as like that steady, the enforcer, the steady kind of like the best friend that was cool in his role. He didn't want to be the big spotlight. He was happy being in his role as kind of the enforcer. And then you had the different versions. You had Barrett. To me, well, I'll start at the end. You had the Dean Malenko and Benoit version, which was kind of a strange one. I don't know. Dean Malenko I thought was a strange fit, but you had Mongo McMichael in there for a while. But I like the old school Horsemen. Your Barry Windhams, your Lugers. But they were a great faction, great group. As far as the music goes, I love the. I'm on like a little WCW tangent, but the Fabulous Freebirds. If you remember the Bad Street USA,
Yeah,
that was an awesome. That was a really cool entrance. And what was the third one?
Entrance music, and then tag team. Favorite tag team?
Oh, tag team. Oh, wow, yeah. So the Steiner Brothers for sure. Yeah, the Steiner Brothers. I think, that when Scott used to do that Frankensteiner, that was nobody did that back then, and he was a big guy. And that, now you see that move often. Obviously, the different variations of it, but I just remember seeing him do that Frankensteiner and just being blown away. And then Rick Steiner was just a great character. He was just a great character. The dog-faced gremlin. They were awesome. I love those two. Who would be your favorite? I think you're gonna say Road Warriors for you
for a tag team.
Yeah.
Yeah, Legion of Doom and Demolition.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are definitely my top two.
What would be your faction?
Oh man, for faction, I would have to go with 1997 Heart Foundation.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's
the five of them together, man. Whew, that was great. Yeah. Beautiful.
I agree.
I'll never forget 97 King of the Ring. We were in Providence for that. I think you were there too, right?
Yeah. Yep.
I was there with Jimmy Madden, and Brian Sully was a couple seats in front of me. You saw people scattered everywhere. Yeah. It was a hot event. Everybody was wanting to go to that. And initially it was supposed to be Brett versus Shawn. Brett got injured. So Shawn versus Stone Cold. At the time, they were the tag team champions. So it was very unique to see them against each other. And Bret Hart was still there. He did an in-ring promo with all the members, Pillman, everybody was there from the Hart Foundation. And, to this day, that's still my favorite match that I saw in person because it was so many of my favorites. It was the Legion of Doom and Psycho Sid against Owen Hart, British Bulldog, and Jim Neidhart.
Yep.
Yeah, that was amazing to see. And I was so happy I finally got to hear the Warrior pop, as they say, for LOD.
Yeah.
Because early on in the 80s, I didn't get to see them. So this was like my only opportunity to see the Legion of Doom do their thing. So that was pretty awesome. I was a huge Sid fan. So seeing Sid out there was, and then obviously the King of the Ring tournament, Triple H won it. You had Farouk against The Undertaker for the championship. Yep. And I think that was the only time that they wrestled, So there were a lot of cool elements to that show, and they were still testing out the New Age Outlaws. So it wasn't a thing yet. And on the Countdown show, it was the Headbangers versus Road Dogg and Bart Gunn instead of Billy Gunn. And they were doing that for a while on house shows and Countdown shows. It was always Bart Gunn. And then I guess last minute, they're like, no, let's flip it. We're going to get Billy Gunn in there.
Yeah. Good. I love Billy Gunn. The Outlaws are another good tag team. They kind of go under the radar a little bit, but they were good. I enjoyed watching them. I remember the what was that dumpster match or whatever it was against Terry Funk and Cactus Jack. Was that a Royal Rumble? Was that the Royal Rumble?
It might have been WrestleMania.
Yes, WrestleMania. You're right. Yeah, that was a good, cool tag match with the weapons and dumpsters and all that stuff. But yeah, the New Age Outlaws were a great team. Was the '96 the same year as that? They had that big 10-man tag tournament at the pay-per-view in Canada between the Hart Foundation.
So that was In Your House Canadian Stampede.
Yes.
Yeah, that was probably '97.
Okay, yeah, I remember that was a good crowd, pro Hart Foundation crowd. So that was cool to see.
That was crazy.
Getting cheered up. Yeah, it was a good event.
That was such a strange ending though, with Owen Hart winning with the roll up. After all the power moves and all the craziness, Owen rolls up. I don't know who it was, maybe Stone Cold, but He won with a roll up.
Oh yeah.
No, Patriot wasn't in. It was LOD, Ken Shamrock, Gold Dust, and
Okay. Yep.
somebody else. I'm trying to think now. Gold Dust, Shamrock, LOD, and Stone Cold.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and Owen
And it was
rolled
a
him
roll
up,
up
and it
to-
was
to
such a
Austin,
just a
wasn't it?
very basic, weak roll up. It was so slow, and he hardly had him pinned down, and he won. And I'm like, what? That's how it ended. It's kind of.
And there's so many possibilities in a 10-man. There's so many possibilities in a 10-man where you can make somebody, you can pin somebody without making them look bad. You could have done a million different things with interference and all that, and that is a weird route to take. But I do remember that event just having a good feel to a good vibe for sure.
Yeah, I remember the In Your Houses. They started in '95 with Mother's Day, and they gave away the house, which was kind of unique. And In Your House at that time was kind of like a secondary pay-per-view, so you were getting it for $12.95 instead of the $30-$40. And In Your Houses were 2 hours instead of 3 hours at first, and then eventually they would branch on to another hour there. But let's talk about Joe's Hardcore Wrestling Talk Show. Pretty funny time. This was October of 1998. I was inspired to start the show because I was watching Public Access, and I'd always see, Powerbomb ringside with Maniac Mike. I would see USWF Juice, the backyard wrestling.
Travis Savage,
yeah. Of course, Talking Wrestling with Cody Boynes. That was all. It was. I always enjoyed it. I just watched it whenever it was on, and I just said, why can't I do something like this? So decided to start the talk show and linked up with Stacy Lopes, who was one of the wrestlers for UCW, and he was influential in kind of getting me some of my first guests for the show. And I kind of told him who I wanted, and he was, one of the promoters for UCW, so he really went above and beyond and got the people that I was looking for and threw in a couple extras. And, what are your memories of early on, when I asked you to be the co-host and being a part of that?
So I remember I was totally pumped for it. But then when the moment actually came and we got, we had the microphones in our hand, that first episode, I was definitely very nervous. But my memories are the guests were just always super generous with their time. They were just good guys. No agendas. They weren't tough, difficult to deal with at all. And I just appreciated those guys giving their time. I remember, towards the end, weren't you taking some bumps towards the end there, chair shots towards the end or something? Or did something happen towards the end where one of us went through a table or something? Was that?
Stacy Lopes, he wrestled as Dane at the time.
Okay. Yep.
And he and Draven attacked Derek Destiny in the studio.
That's right. Yes.
And he body slammed him right on the floor,
Yeah. Yep. And I remember actually doing, you had an event at the American Legion on Willard Avenue.
Yes.
And I remember I was behind the mic calling some of the action there. That was a good time. I think there might've been a little, damage done to one of the windows there, if I recall, but, that was a fun time for sure.
The American Legion, that was post number 10 in Riverside. And of course that was my first show. I remember it was September 10th of 99, and it was HWF Ring Wars, and Vertebreaker went against Suicidal Silva in a hardcore match. And I'm young, I'm watching it, goes through the window, and initially I take it in almost as a fan. I'm like, oh man, wow. And then I'm like, wait, that's not good. Yeah. So then they page, would Joe Bruen please come to ringside? And I had to replace the window the next day. I remember driving with them to the place next to Schroeder's Deli there.
Okay. Yep. It's not there anymore, but I remember the place for sure. Yep.
They had windows and paint and different things.
Yeah, I think it was like a Sherwin-Williams or something like that. Yeah.
And it was like $30 back then, but that was a lot of money back then for me, and I had to replace that. And but it was a great memory. You on commentary. I was actually watching some of the matches a few weeks ago, and to hear your commentary, and you got, I think Clement was in the crowd, and Neil Mercier, and there were a few different people there. Justin Fournier and Matt Kenny were there. But it was just
Yeah, that was always my dream. You know, as much as I loved wrestling, my dream was never to be a wrestler. I wanted to be, you know, Jim Ross back there calling the action. So for one night, I had that opportunity to do that, and it was great. It was awesome. I loved it. You know, the commentary to me is like such an important part of wrestling, whether it was Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan or JR and Lawler. It can really make or break a show, and it's important. It's an important part of the show, and I always enjoyed the commentary. It was always a part of the show that I, paid attention to. I never watch it on mute or anything like that. I want to hear the commentary.
Well, who's your favorite commentating duo?
I would say, well, Jim Ross is my favorite commentator, but for duo, I like Gorilla and Bobby the Brain. They just played off each other so well. They played off each other so well. It was great. And some of those matches back then weren't to the caliber of matches you see now. So it made the program much more entertaining, because you had a lot of the enhancement style matches back then, which weren't they weren't these 5-star 30-minute matches. So it kind of added some life to a show that might have been a little boring otherwise. So those two are great.
Yeah, the very first show for HWF, and I remember we had Sick and Twisted, which was Mad Dog Matt Storm and Draven, I believe. Prince Ivan Zangveen. And they teamed up with HCRC, which was the Hardcore Ring Crew. And his name was Steve Taylor. And I think they went against Mark Thunder and Mr. Troubleman, Anthony Rufo, one other person, maybe Mr. Biggs. And then there was Robbie Ellis versus Iceberg, Sonny D. You had, like I said, Vertebreaker and Suicidal Silva in a hardcore match. You had a fatal four-way, Derek Destiny, Dr. Heresy, TJ Richter, and Don Juan DeSanto. I was a heel manager at ringside for that match. And then you had the 20-man battle royal, which to this day is my favorite part of your commentary. You're sitting in the crowd, obviously at the camera, I should say. As you're commentating, Neil Mercier must be close by. He's probably a seat or two away from you. And you're commentating, and the drunk bartender runs into the ring. He decides it's a good idea to get into the ring. And you're just taking it in. You don't know that this is going to happen. And so he rolls in the ring, his shirt's up, his belly's hanging out. And you go, wait a minute, Neil, who's this individual? And it's my favorite line of the night. The way you say it is just so good. And then he gets in there, and he is genuinely the bartender from that night. He's been drinking, and now he's in the ring, and he goes right after Anthony Rufo. So Anthony Rufo lights him up. He chops him in the chest so hard, like 3 times. The guy drops to the ground. Another guy chops him, and then he just gets tossed right out. And I'm like, why did this guy run in the ring? It's insane,
Once you make that decision to go in the ring, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And I don't care how much you'd been drinking, because I would never think to do that for sure.
Yeah. So what are some of your early memories of Riverside? Let's talk about Riverside growing up there, some of your favorite places to go, some of your favorite parts of Riverside.
Yeah. So the junior high and the Riverside Rec, of course, that was the hangout, and you had the path that connected the junior high to the rec, and that was cool little spot to hang out. You'd have your Dunkin' Donuts and Town Pizza down there on Willard Avenue. Couple, hang out there, hang out in the parking lot. We always, back then it was big. You don't see it as much nowadays, but we'd have groups, 8-10 people kind of roaming the streets of Riverside, 8 to 10 kids. I feel like you don't see that anymore. I don't know if kids just don't go out as much or whatever, but we were always outside riding bikes, walking down your way. Sabins Point was always a fun spot to go to. They used to have that. Remember, they had that bonfire. I think they still do it. The bonfire on the 3rd of July. Down at the Point was always a good time. Going down by the terrace, the beach down by the terrace, that was a nice little spot to hang out. So we did a lot of walking back in our junior high days. Got some good exercise in. Did a lot of walking. I remember playing football in junior high. We'd be at the rec, practice every day at the rec. A couple of years, I was actually I was in decent shape for a couple of years there, between football practice and just walking the streets of Riverside. And I just love to hang out with my friends and just kind of bullshit, shoot the breeze, hang out at someone's house. Like you said, Jimmy Madden would always be over his house, and good times for sure. you look. It's good to look back. I always look back and think about the. It was just a fun. I thought it was a fun period of time. The junior, that kind of like that grade 7 through 10 time period. I thought it was just a fun time, especially with everybody, the wrestling and the pay-per-views and all that stuff. It was a good time for sure.
So going back to the talk show a little bit, the first episode we had the Decolation, Dane and Darius. We had the superstar Butch Petrillo. We had the Iceberg Sonny D. We had Anthony Rufo when he was Mr. Troubleman, and we had Bad Boy Billy Black. So that was episode 1. Do you have any memory of episode 1 as far as being there and then maybe the aftermath, like when it was finally over? How you felt?
Yeah. So I just remember. Funny you say Iceberg, because I was super nervous, and I think he kind of knew. I probably tell by looking at me I was a little bit nervous, so he just was very helpful and just kind of like enjoy it, relax, don't freak out over it. He was just very helpful, and all those guys, they were just very nice. Superstar Butch Petrillo, just a funny character, nice guy. They were all good guys, and it was just fun to hang out there and kind of see their world. And then Derek Destiny, he was very involved. It seemed like he helped get a lot of the guests, and he was on there a few times. He was a character. He was a funny guy. But it was just all good memories. Cable Axxess, you tell people now Cable Axxess, I don't know if it even exists anymore, but it was cool to get that little studio time and do our thing. One of those things that you kind of always talked about doing, but you never thought you'd actually do it. So to actually go through with it and do it was awesome. It was fun.
Yeah. Episode 2 was actually, I'm sorry, episode 3 you were a part of. You missed episode 2 for some reason, but you came back in episode 3, and we did it live from Jose Perez's home.
Okay. Yes. Wow. I remember now that you. I had forgotten about it until you mentioned it. He was another guy that was good. He was good to us. Jose Perez. He was very good to us.
You and I went over his house for it was a pay-per-view. It was an ECW pay-per-view. And so we went over to watch the pay-per-view, but beforehand we filmed an episode of the talk show and interviewed him on the couch.
Yes, he was a very nice guy, very helpful. Enjoyed being around him. And that was ECW. I'm trying to think of which ECW pay-per-view that was. 97, you said?
No, my show started October of 98. This was the 3rd episode, so probably very early 99, maybe late 98.
Okay.
Yeah. Could be Anarchy Rules 99, maybe.
Okay. All right. Yeah. That was another, the ECW, that was a fun time, a totally different take on the product, and you still see a lot of the influence today of ECW today. And they had some good pay-per-views back then. Good pay-per-views. They were fun.
Yeah. I think for me, ECW was on, I want to say it was channel 25. And it was on one of those fuzzy channels, and you could hardly see it. And I remember, going to that at midnight or 11 p.m. or something, and barely seeing it. But that's how I would get my ECW TV. And then on that same channel, you would get Smoky Mountain Wrestling. You would also get the USWA. And USWA at that time had a relationship with WWF. So you'd see Tatanka and the Body Donnas and like guys from that era wrestling the USWA guys, which I thought was so cool, And then when some of them would show up in WWF, you know them, I remember that guy. He was on USWA. So
the Smoky Mountain did the same thing, right? They used WWE talent on there.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Rock and Roll Express and Heavenly Bodies at the Survivor Series, and yeah.
And that was that when Cornette had his NWA faction. Remember he had the NWA faction with Jeff Jarrett and
that was a little later. That was 98. That was Jarrett and Barry Windham and had a few others, but for some reason that didn't. I actually talked to Vince Russo about that on this show.
I heard. I watched that episode, and he claims he knew it was gonna be a dud, right? He said he knew it was gonna fail, but but you gotta let Cornette do his thing. What are your thoughts on Jim Cornette? Do you listen to his podcast? Are you a fan?
I love Jim Cornette. I do. I mean, he's very outspoken. Obviously, he's very opinionated. He is very old school. So if you don't like old school, you're probably not going to like his opinions. But I'm open-minded, and I don't mind. I love old school. I like today's wrestling as well. So, he makes a lot of good, valid points. You don't have to agree with everything, but I think overall, at the end of the day, he is entertaining.
Oh, for sure. That's my favorite. I listen. Do you listen? I don't know how many wrestling podcasts you listen to, but Cornette to me, that's my favorite podcast. And same thing. I don't agree with everything. Like I think his Kenny Omega, he's way off on his opinion. I think Kenny Omega is one of the all-time top 5 in-ring guys, and Cornette has no use for him. But I disagree with him on that and some other things. But overall, I like the way he takes it serious. He takes wrestling serious, and I think I like that. I don't like, I like the fact that he takes it serious, and you can tell it means something to him. And he feels personally insulted when some guy's wrestling an invisible man or a broomstick or something like that. Yeah. He feels like it takes away the credibility, and I get that. I get it. It's the cool thing about wrestling is that there's something for everybody. Right. And that's what makes it great. So if you don't like that, don't watch it. But I think I think it only helps AEW when he does his reviews and things like that, because sometimes I'll watch it before listening just because I want to hear what he's going to say about it, where maybe I wouldn't have even watched it beforehand. So I think even though he's critical of AEW, I think it still helps because it gets people talking about AEW. And I love, I don't know, are there any other podcasts that you're listening to?
I watch a lot of podcasts. I mean, I film myself often I film 2 to 3 episodes a day. Oh, wow. But when I'm not doing podcasts, I'm constantly taking them in. So Kevin Nash, I'm a fan of his.
Yeah.
He's just so laid back, and Sean Oliver is also laid back, but kind of has like a little cockiness to him. I just like their combo, their back and forth. Yep. Chris Van Vliet, does a great job with the interviews. I never miss an episode of his. Of course, Cornette, something to wrestle with Bruce yep. Pritchard. Jim Ross and Conrad, I watch sometimes. Jeff Jarrett, I've seen a few times. I just feel like Conrad's on every single one. So for me, it's kind of like a Conrad overload. So I'll kind of pick one. And, Conrad does a great job.
Absolutely.
But he's on every show. And I'd rather just kind of pick one and then kind of stick with that,
For a while, I was actually, and I never thought in a million years I would listen to this podcast, but I was hooked on the Tony Schiavone and Conrad for a while. Schiavone is pretty funny on there. I never really had much of an opinion about him back in the old days. I mean, I thought he was fine. I didn't think he was terrible. I didn't think he was great, but he's on that podcast. I used to listen to that one religiously for about a year or so, and he was hilarious. I like the Bruce podcast, but with him, I just feel like you get a lot. He bullshits a lot, so it's tough to sometimes to I don't know. I have my issues with him on certain things, but I think Conrad does an awesome job, and he's built up something really cool. Have you ever gone to the StarCast events, or have you ever been?
No.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I've never been to StarCast or WrestleCade or WrestleCon. Never been to any of those big ones. How about you? Have you ever hit any conventions?
No, just the ones that you ran. But that was about it. But I would like to. I would have. I know the StarCast is expensive. That's the thing I was going to I had some things I wanted to bring up with you as far as wrestling now versus back in our day. And I just feel like it's so expensive now. To be a wrestling fan is expensive. The average ticket price. I know you've got. Are your kids into wrestling too, or?
Not so much. No, I mean, my youngest son, he'll watch it with me. Okay. But other than that, they were into it for maybe a year, and then they just completely fell out of it.
Because I just feel like it's not affordable for a family to go to a show. I mean, the ticket prices are crazy, and if you want, now you need to have a Netflix subscription, you need to have ESPN Plus, you need to have HBO Max. It's just, it's expensive, and I feel like they're kind of not targeting they're targeting like those hardcore fans that they know will pay for this stuff, as opposed to, the McMahon days where it was like a family entertainment. And I feel like they're kind of getting away from that and just chasing every last dollar, at least at WWE, at least.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. I mean, it's hard, especially if you have a family, like you said, but in 2008, you could get front row ringside for $100. Now you can't even get in the building for $100,
Oh. It's like, I thought about doing Mania in Vegas, but they want you to pay all this money before you even know the card, and then it's 2 nights. So even if the match you want to see might not even be on the night that you have the ticket for, which would be equally frustrating. I guess you'd have to play it safe and get the Sunday night, assuming that's where the biggest match is going to be. But it's tough. It's tough. I feel like they're pushing their luck a little bit with all these subscription services and trying to squeeze every last penny. And I get it's a publicly traded company. I get all that stuff. So
yeah.
They need to make money, but just hope that they take into consideration that, you know, times are tough for a lot of people, and people enjoy the product. And they want to be able to enjoy it and be able to afford to enjoy it. So I hope they do.
I wish it were all in one spot. I must say that. You know, you have Peacock, you have Netflix, you have you know, all these different locations, and you got to buy them all to see different things. You want Raw, you got to go here. You want pay-per-views, you got to go here. You want the old content, you got to go here. And it's just like, you know, first of all, who has the time to navigate where everything is? A lot of people don't even understand how to get to certain things, and you know, I don't know. It just put it all in one spot. Be easier for everybody.
Yeah, I thought for a while with Peacock, I felt like they were on the right track there with Peacock, and then they got away from that. And then they also, when they added SmackDown a third hour, I mean, there was no need. 2 hours of that show was plenty. They had a third hour to, you know, make some extra money. Now it's a 3-hour show, so it's a big time commitment to keep up with the product. It's a big time commitment. You know, 3 hours on Friday, 2 on Monday. You get a pay-per-view or PLE every month. You get NXT, so it's a big investment. And one other thing I wanted to ask you about too was your opinion on. So in our day when we were younger, like we talked about earlier, you'd see a lot of basically before the Monday Night Wars, before the Nitro Raw thing, you'd see a lot of the TV matches where your enhancement guys, which is a good way to push, if you're trying to push the wrestler, you know, you have them go in there, face 2 guys or whatever, handicap match. They weren't the most exciting matches, but it helped establish who the stars were and who wasn't. Do you feel like now you don't have that? Do you feel like it's tougher for them to establish top tier guys? You know, you'll see a guy debut in AEW and lose his first match. You would never see that happen before. But again, there's not really those enhancement type guys that go out there and do that kind of work anymore. So I guess my question is, do you think it's better the way it is now where there's no enhancement matches and it's kind of 50-50 type booking, or do you think it makes it tougher to create stars?
In my opinion, I mean, they're creating the stars now in the NXT, you know, where back then they didn't have that, you know what I mean? So they didn't have that avenue to do that. But at the same time, I prefer having some enhancement talent mixed in on the show, because if you're having everybody be a star that's appearing on the show, then there's going to be somebody on the show that's not going to look strong. You know, and by having enhancement talent on the show, you're able to make certain stars look very strong, because they're going to, you know, plow through somebody, and you're going to build up that character. You're going to show off their move set. And, you know, you're not getting that if everybody is a star, you know, and it kind of becomes a little more difficult when everybody's a star, because it'll hurt one of them, you know, who's going to win, who's going to lose.
Yeah.
And if every match is like that, it's really difficult where, you know, okay, this week we have 3 squash matches. We'll make these 3 stars look good. And then you have your main event or your double main event or whatever, you know, that way there's a little bit of everything, and you're building those people, you know. I don't know. I just feel like to have some enhancement talent in there is a good thing.
And I haven't watched Raw this week, but I haven't watched Raw, but I heard that, and it's kind of pissed me off that they had Obafemi do a handicap match against the War Raiders and just kind of destroyed them as if they were enhancement talent. I don't know if that's true or not. I read it somewhere, but that's kind of, I think, you know, disrespectful to those guys. Those guys have been in the business for a long time, and they're 2 pros. You know, I think that's not how you should. If you don't want to give them a main event run, I understand it, but you shouldn't be having him as the guy that gets destroyed by Obafemi. I think that's where an enhancement talent. You know, you get the local talent. That's when that comes in handy, I think, because Obafemi is a perfect guy to do that with. You know, kind of have him go out there and destroy people. But I just think it's kind of disrespectful to those guys, to the War Raiders, because they've established themselves and they've paid their dues. They deserve better than that.
Yeah, the one thing that's tough that I've never really liked in wrestling, but more so the last 10, 15 years, is that, you know, somebody's brought up, they're going to look strong when they debut, like an Obafemi, but you still have guys like the War Raiders who, you know, they're not washed up. They're not guys who have been there for 20 years. You know, these guys were doing very well just less than a half a year ago. You know, so to have them all of a sudden just get destroyed, and they do that all the time. They'll, you know, pump up somebody, and then they'll just have them, you know, squashed to whoever the next new shiny wrestler is. And it's like, let's give everybody some time. You don't have to crush, you know, everybody like that. And I feel, especially with all the content that we have, Raw, SmackDown's now 3 hours. We can showcase these people without hurting other storylines and other gimmicks.
Exactly. And I totally agree with you. And the other thing I wanted to ask you too about now versus then, the in-match commercial breaks. Do you think that ruins the flow of the matches? I mean, why you wouldn't watch a football game? It wouldn't be third down on a 3rd and 10 in a football game, and they wouldn't say, "Hey, we're going to take a commercial break and be back." You would take the break in between matches. Do you have any? Do you think that kind of hurts the match quality? You can't really get into a television match the way you can, at a PLE or at a live house show or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I'm just so used to it because it's always been that way. So in the middle of the match, they go to a commercial, sometimes two.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just how it's always been. I don't think it necessarily hurts the match. Now they do it that way where you can, see it in a little box while the commercial.
Yeah, which is fine. Yeah, which is better at least. Yeah.
Yeah. But even that, I'm not like a super big fan of because there's no sound usually on the wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
You're hearing the commercial instead. So I don't know. I think that, well, first of all, they have no control usually from what I hear. They just, if it's time to go to commercial, it's time to go to commercial. They have X amount of commercials that they need to fit in within a certain period of time. So I get it. But at the same time, it's too bad that you couldn't do it right before the match or even maybe right at the beginning of the match. That way we can kind of see everything unfold.
Yeah.
But it's not always done that way, unfortunately.
Yeah, I just think that hurts the product a little bit. And then you kind of know that you know when the break's coming. You can tell by the announcer's voice that you're about to hit that break. And it's just one of my pet peeves with modern day wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah, a little aggravating. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that. But when it comes to Mount Rushmore, you can look at it different ways. Who made the biggest impact in the industry? Who your personal favorites are? However you want to look at it. Who is your Mount Rushmore of pro wrestling?
Okay, so yeah, the way I kind of look at it as the total pack, the total overall. Doesn't have to necessarily be the greatest in-ring guy, but like you said, significance to the business. So I start with Stone Cold for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. I think he, WCW, WWF might not be around these days. If it wasn't for Steve Austin, they were getting crushed by Nitro in the ratings every week, and DX, Steve Austin. I think Austin primarily is the reason why WWE emerged victorious, and you'd see him on all the talk shows. You see him on MTV. He was everywhere for about. It wasn't a long run on top compared to some of these guys now. It was probably 3 or 4 years, but he was mainstream pop culture, so he's definitely on there. Stone Cold, no doubt, and then Hulk Hogan. I have to put him on there because when I originally started watching back in '87, WrestleMania 3, he was the biggest thing going. I had the workout tapes with the jump rope, the Hogan jump rope, the Hogan hand vice you would squeeze. So I was a big the headband. I was a big Hogan fan as a young wrestling fan. And he's another one that he brought WWF to the mainstream, and he the territories and all that. Just kind of everything kind of consolidated, and WWF took over. And then he was able to reinvent himself as Hollywood Hogan, which I never in a million years ever saw that coming. Never thought it would work once he actually turned. I'm like, this is not going to be cool. But I thought he did an awesome job with it. And obviously not the greatest in-ring guy, but if you can do a big boot and a leg drop and bring 20,000 people to their feet, I mean, then good for you. Work smarter, not harder. And he was able to do that. The third guy is going to be Ric Flair. He was the cool. He was the coolest thing going. I just thought he was the coolest thing. I had his little wrestling buddy growing up. Loved Flair, loved his attitude, loved the way he, the promos and his matches. For the time, I thought his matches were good. I know you got a lot of the same things in each match, the throwing into the turnbuckle and kind of flipping, some of the same things going up the top. I don't think he's ever, whatever move he was going for from the top rope, I don't think he's ever hit it because he just gets body slammed off the top rope all the time. But I thought Flair had some great matches. I love the way he would kind of sneaky heel, kind of cheap victories. And it was always good when he was the champion and Sting was chasing after him for the title. Or even Dusty Rhodes, which was a little bit before my time. But I think the whole idea of I like the heel champion and then the good guy, the baby faces chasing after them. I think that makes the best TV, the best programming. Last one's going to be Shawn Michaels because he was just unbelievable in the ring. I would say Shawn Michaels pre back injury, when he left for retired, but the 90s, the mid 90s to late 90s. I I don't know if you ever saw a bad Shawn Michaels match, whether it was when he was with Sherry with the IC title and when he was first kind of establishing himself as a singles guy, all the way through DX. I mean, when I heard about the match when he lost to Austin before at the Boston Garden at WrestleMania, the injuries that he was dealing with, it wasn't a great match for sure, but just to be able to go in there and perform with all the injuries, I thought, he kind of reinvented, or he kind of brought the ring work level up a notch,
Sure.
along with Bret Hart. When you had that early 90s era of kind of the big guys that, were a little bit limited in the ring, guys like Shawn and Bret made it possible for a 230-pound guy to win the world championship. You really wouldn't see that in WWF back in the old days. You had to be a bigger guy, and Shawn was just, and of course he had the great, as a heel, he was awesome. He just had that attitude, cocky attitude. You wanted with the chewing the gum, you just wanted to give him a smack. I thought he was a great heel in that late 90s era there. So Austin, Flair, Hogan, and Shawn would be mine. What do you got? What do you think?
Oh man, well, we just did this recently. I mean, I'd have to go with Hogan, because he was so. If it weren't for Hogan, I don't think it would have gotten to the level that it got to. So he first and foremost has to be there. Stone Cold, without a doubt, because I feel like he even surpassed Hogan on many levels and brought it to crazy heights. So Stone Cold and Hogan. I got to give it to John Cena because 20 years there where all these guys retired, John Cena's the one kind of carrying it on and keeping that ball rolling. And John Cena was just as popular as Hulk Hogan with the kids.
Absolutely.
There were so many fans, so many kids that looked up to John Cena. And so I got to put Cena on there. So Cena, Hogan, Austin, and Andre the Giant, just because of, Andre is one of those guys. He's, even if you're not a wrestling fan, who Andre the Giant is. And he was that big of a star and he made such an impact. And, WrestleMania 3, you mentioned that was your first one.
Yeah.
You couldn't have Hogan go to the heights that he did without Andre.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like they kind of both deserve a spot on that. And obviously there are tons of people that, you could put on there, but I think an honorable mention would go to Bruno Sammartino. He was before my time, but he was selling out Madison Square Garden for a record amount of times, like 100 and something times. So to do that in his era without all the social media and without all the hype, that's impressive. So, Bruno's also right there, I feel.
Yeah, it's a great call. And Cena, I've dipped over the years, kind of dipped out of wrestling for brief periods of time, then go back into it. So in the beginning of Cena's run, I wasn't really too into it as much, but definitely have to tip your hat for all the work, 20 years on top and all the house shows, all the Make-A-Wish, all the, he was a good representative for the company at a time when I think that's what the direction they wanted to go, a little more family friendly product. I thought he was a great person, great representation of that. I saw you had his dad on. I saw you had Johnny Fabulous on there on your show earlier. You seem to have a relationship with him. You seem to know him for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was a ring announcer for 10 years, and he was a manager on the independent scene. So I've known him since 2003. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good guy. Was he a fan before his son was into it? Yeah. He seems like it. Was he a fan before his son got into it, or?
Yeah, he was a huge fan growing up and always into it, into the old school guys, Bruno and all of them. And, he's always been into it. Awesome. So going back to the talk show, episode 4, we had Derek Destiny, we had Altitude, and we had Jimmy Schultz. You were there for that. Episode 5, we had the Dream Lord. We had Superstar Butch Petrillo back. We had Derek Destiny back. We had the Wild Thing, Johnny Justice. We had Dane. And we also had Maniac Mike. We were confronted live on the air by Maniac Mike saying that we stole his spot. And the funny thing is that was kind of a true story, is they aired our show instead of his by accident.
I know. I hate to disrespect Mike. Yeah, he's a legend.
Yeah, he was mad, but that was a great segment. I watched that recently,
Yeah.
and it was just so funny the way it came off. And then Butch Petrillo comes up to kind of be the next guest, and Maniac Mike just looks at him and he goes, "Just a moment, Ralphus," and and Butch blows the whistle in his face, and so good, really good.
No, that was awesome. Yeah, it was great to have Maniac on there. I always loved his show, and funny guy. Was always a big fan of his. Used to watch the show on Friday nights, cable access all the time growing up. Big Maniac Mike fan for sure.
We had Jimmy Madden as a cameraman. We had Will O'Donnell as a cameraman at one point. I think Will was the first cameraman. So yeah,
start. Will O'Donnell got to start with you, with us.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's probably why they considered him for an Emmy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Did we get mentioned in the thank you speech or?
Right. I didn't get a statue. I know that. But Will's doing well. He's an Emmy Award winner, and flies the drones like a crazy man. He's so precise, and he's done it for the military and for film. So pretty awesome that he's moving on to big things. He lives in England now, which is crazy.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
Awesome. Good for him.
Ruthless Aggression era. What were your thoughts on that? You mentioned Cena. You kind of dipped in, you dipped out, but overall, what was that like for you?
So I thought it was. I love Kurt Angle. I thought was great in that time period. I thought he had some really strong matches, but that was definitely one of those periods where I dipped out for a little bit. I don't know if it was so much of not being interested in the product. It might have been a work situation or something like that where I dipped out for a little bit. But I would say that not one of my favorite periods. I enjoyed the Angle matches. Like I said, I enjoyed the hard hitting action, but overall, it wasn't my. I think is that when they started with the brand split, and that right around that time too, with the splitting Raw and SmackDown into two separate.
Yeah, brands. I mean that was kind of almost even like maybe right before that. It was like 2002.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't crazy about that at first. I don't know. It's tough. I understood the idea. You had too many guys for one show, but then when you had two shows, it kind of wasn't as great. But I thought Benoit, Brock Lesnar, there was definitely some great in-ring action then, and I think. It changed kind of the business as far as the hard hitting. You get more the hard hitting aspect that you see now. I think I know a lot of it's Japanese wrestling influence, but I think that Ruthless Aggression era has an influence on some of the stiff hard hitting stuff you see today, which I have mixed feelings about that. I guess I would say I don't want to see these guys out there hurting each other, and I think you can do wrestle a safe style and still be entertaining. So, but ultimately it's up to those guys, whatever they want to do. I just, get worried that some of these guys, I get worried seeing some of these guys doing these, some of these crazy moves that, they're going to fail it down the line. And I hope not.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was WWF, when they became WWE, what was your initial reaction, during that time period when you heard that was going to happen?
I couldn't believe it. I just figured, I was surprised. I didn't think that the World Wildlife Federation would result in the WWF having to change to WWE. And it's an adjustment, and it's one of those things where people today still call it WWF. This WWF just feels more natural. It flows. World Wrestling Entertainment. I know Vince McMahon. It was a big entertainment. It's a big buzzword for him. But they had no choice. But like I said, people still, it's kind of like people still call Twitter. They don't call it X. For a while there, like for the first 10 years, people would still call it WWF and not WWE. I think now it's gotten better, but still every once in a while you'll hear somebody mention WWF. But they handled it as well as you could. I mean, that's a tough transition to rebrand your entire company, and they weren't allowed to. I mean, they had to blur out the logo from, if they would show an old clip, they had to blur out the logo. It seemed like I think they still do that to this day. So it seemed like a very a big undertaking to change your entire company, name and logo and all that. So,
and why do you think that is? The very early 80s, they were WWF. Yes. They changed to WWF. So they have been WWF for years and years. And then all of a sudden, 2002, oh, yeah, no, you can't be WWF.
Yeah. It makes no sense. And like I said, the World Wildlife Federation, I think if you polled 100 people on the streets back then, what does WWF stand for? I think 85, 90 of them are going to say World Wrestling Federation. I don't think the World Wildlife Federation was that. And I don't know why they couldn't just both coexist. They're two total separate, one's World Wrestling Federation, one's World Wildlife Foundation. So they're separate meanings. And yeah, I was really surprised by that. And, you know, Vince McMahon's not the kind of guy he doesn't lose a lot of these kind of legal battles. You know, he's always had the best representation, the best lawyers, but for some reason that he lost that one. I was surprised.
Remember the steroid scandal where he showed up to court in the neck brace?
Yeah. Yep. And that was, you know, they say that he was really, what did they say? That they were going to have Jerry Jarrett. Was it Jerry Jarrett run the company? They thought that Vince was going to go to jail. So they were going to have, I think it was Jerry Jarrett come run the company for, you know, if Vince was in jail for 18 months or whatever. I think I heard that. You probably know more than me.
Yeah, Jerry was there at the time. He was, you know, one of the, I don't know what you'd call agents or you know. But yeah, he was a part of it at the time. But I had heard that. Yeah, I don't know if that would have actually happened, but you know, originally Gorilla Monsoon was going to buy WWF from Vince's dad, and right. He was a partner, you know, but then he sold off his share, I guess, to Vince Jr. And when he took over, and but Gorilla always remained such a, you know, integral part of it, and he was always treated with the utmost respect. So Vince really, you know, gave him a great run.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember he was the commissioner there towards the end of his. He was the commissioner of the WWF towards the end of his run there before he got sick and got ill.
Yeah, I'll never forget that as a kid. You know, when he was attacked on Raw by Vader.
Yeah,
man, it was such a big moment. I was like, whoa, because you never saw Gorilla get physical, you know?
Yeah, no, that was great. Yep. Yeah. There was some of those moments. I don't know, like. Do you remember the Tyson? Obviously, you remember the Tyson pushing Stone Cold on Monday Night Raw. Yeah. Mike Tyson and Stone Cold got that little shoving match. Like, for some reason, that just like hit for me. I don't know. I just was like, I was going crazy on my couch. I didn't know, is this supposed to happen? Is this real? Is this what's going on here? Just a shove, you know, nothing crazy, just a push. And it was like, that was one of those moments, those kind of moments that stick out to me. Those ones where you kind of blurs the lines and you don't know what's real and what's part of the show. That's why I love wrestling, is when you get those surprises that you don't see coming.
Yeah. I'd say celebrity-wise, that was probably the best usage of a celebrity in the history of pro wrestling.
Yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. And that helped put them on the map. I mean, they were already Attitude Era, but that kind of stamped it. And that was like, okay, you know, we're on the way to the races now.
Yep. That was a big, that was an important time for sure. Pivotal moment.
So when WWF bought WCW, what was your initial reaction when that happened? And how do you feel that it transitioned, you know, the way it unfolded? How do you feel that went?
Yeah, definitely didn't really live up to what I thought. You know, you had all these dream matches in your head and, you know, Goldberg, Stone Cold, or, you know, whatever. Had all these dream matches. And then, you know, you found out that a lot of these guys weren't even coming over, that they were going to get paid just to sit home and finish out their WCW contracts, which I 100% don't blame them for. I would do the same thing, but it wasn't, you didn't really get what you didn't really get what you thought you were going to get. And then it turns into guys on WWE joining Team WCW. I thought, you know, I like most people, I thought the invasion angle kind of fell flat. I don't know if Vince knew. I'm sure he knew when he bought the company that he wasn't going to get those guys, but I just assumed that they were all coming over and we were going to have all these dream matches, and you know, didn't pan out that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think initially, you know, when Vince bought it, I don't think he was really worried about obtaining talent. I think he was buying it to get rid of the competition. And, you know, So that was, you know, mission accomplished. And then he probably looked at, okay, who can we bring in? And then he probably realized, okay, half of these guys are under a deal, you know, that they'd rather stay home and collect money. So we're not getting Kevin Nash. We're not getting Sting. We're not getting, you know, Goldberg, you know, for another, year, 2 years, something like that. Mm-hmm. Eventually, obviously, we'd get Goldberg. We'd get Big Papa Pump and, you know, DDP. It's too bad DDP wasn't brought in as DDP the way, you know, he was so popular. And to be brought in as a stalker, it was just like,
the Undertaker's wife stalker. That didn't make sense. I think Booker T, I thought definitely benefited from it. Booker T became you know, a household name during that. I think the first match Booker T and Buff Bagwell, I think, on a Monday Night Raw. I know that didn't go over well, but eventually, you know, Booker T became a good character, and you know, one of my all-time favorites for sure. And I feel like he really benefited from the acquisition of WCW by WWE.
You mentioned Steiner Brothers earlier. I feel like they had a good WCW run, their second run, as the Steiner Brothers in the mid 90s. But WWF, they had a pretty good run. It wasn't long, but when they arrived, they won the tag team championships. They wrestled at WrestleMania. They were doing big things, and then all of a sudden they just kind of vanished. And there's no more Steiner Brothers.
Yeah, that was strange.
And I was always disappointed because I was really into them. And then they showed up in WCW, and they had a decent run as a tag team. But I feel like they were kind of overshadowed because they had the Road Warriors, you had the Public Enemy, you had the Nasty Boys, you had like so many tag teams. So they kind of got lost in the mix there, and then eventually would break up and do the singles, run. But yeah, it's too bad that they didn't have more of a run in WWF.
Yeah, I know. And again, that was before all the dirt sheets and all that stuff. So they were just gone one day, and it's like I didn't know that was, I didn't see that coming, and I didn't know there was any issue there. I didn't know the contract situation. Like you said, it wasn't a long run there. But I just love those two because they were, they were legit. You knew in their background, their wrestling background, and in real life, you knew that they, weren't going to take any shit from anybody in the ring or backstage too. And it's just, I don't know. I just love the Steiners, and I love. I think Braun Breaker. That guy's going to be, not saying anything everybody else doesn't know, but he's going to be a big, huge star, maybe the biggest star for the next 10 years or so for WWE.
What are your thoughts on Jacob Fatu?
Love him. He's, I think he's another guy that, main event WrestleMania. Really believable. He's a really believable guy because he's, he doesn't shy away. And he doesn't shy away from his past, which he made mistakes, whatever. He paid his dues, and he doesn't shy away from that. He doesn't try to be something that he's not. He's authentic, and he's a badass. And another guy that he's not the kind of guy you want to bump into in a dark alley because he's a scary guy. And I think that's cool to have. It's important to have guys in wrestling that have that legitimate threat. That you feel like they would kick your ass if you ran into him. I think Jacob Fatu is a great example of that. And sky is the limit. Sky is the limit for him for sure.
Are you a Gunther guy?
Yeah. How about you?
I love Gunther.
Yeah. He reminds me of the old
always
school.
Loved him, even when he was in NXT. Yeah. And he's just great.
And he's one of those guys that, when everybody says it, he would be in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, the 60s. He could be a star in any era. I remember when they changed the name to Gunther originally. I'm like, this is terrible. But now, you get used to it and life goes on. You're used to him as Gunther now. But he's got a good thing going. And I was actually going to ask you, because I don't know much about the guy, Javon Evans. I saw him for the first time on NXT a few weeks ago. Then I saw him at the Rumble. He seems to be special talent.
Yeah, he's a standout for sure. He's doing, moves that most guys can't even do, but you could tell he's a special star. I think that they are all well aware of that. So they're probably going to take care of him and make sure that he gets to that next level. He definitely deserves it. He's been killing it in NXT, did a great job in his a few appearances that he's done for WWE. And speaking of sky's the limit, with him, he could be a megastar. He could be the next AJ Styles. You know what I mean? Yeah. He could be on that level, and I think he will be. A lot of the higher ups in WWE, I've seen some people comment on him, and they feel very high on him. So, I'm looking forward to seeing. When you see him on the card, you're like, oh man, that match is going to be good. I can't wait.
It's like, it reminds me of when we first saw Rey Mysterio in WCW. It was like you saw him do things that you just never saw anybody do, and it was like, how is this guy doing this? When I watch Javon Evans, I get that same feeling, like how the hell does he do this? But yeah, special talent. Hope there's big things ahead for him for sure.
Right. What are your thoughts on El Dandy from WC? No, I'm just kidding.
Bret Hart's a fan.
Yes, he is. Let's go way back. Let's talk about the TWF, the Trampoline Wrestling Federation. You remember Riverside, Rhode Island.
Yes.
Everybody getting down in some action there in the trampoline, the squared circle of Riverside. Whose house was that? Was that Mosier?
Mosier, and then I believe Chris Fanona as well, maybe?
Chris Fanona, yes.
I think two people had, there was a couple of them. Two different people had the trampolines, and that was fun. Yeah, that was awesome. Luckily, we didn't hurt each other because the potential was certainly there. But I remember, I remember definitely Peter Cruz. I remember that was fun. That was awesome. And yeah, we did some crazy stuff. You just try to emulate what you see on TV. That was the time when all those cruiserweights were on Nitro, flying around doing the crazy moves, and you tried to emulate them, and it was fun. And like I said, luckily nobody got hurt, which is the main thing, because we were kind of trying everything that we would see on TV. That was fun.
Right. My most memorable moment from that period was this was at Mosier's house, and we're all in the trampoline. There's a bunch of us in there. Everybody kind of powders out and just kind of runs away. They're all out of the trampoline. I have my back turned, and I'm the only one left in the trampoline. I'm like, what's going on? And I turn around, and it's Jimmy Alves.
Oh, jeez.
big Jimmy Alves is in there, and I'm a big guy, and I have never been manhandled. I'm just big, awkward guy. Nobody picks me up,
Yep.
He powerbombed me, just boom, right to the midsection, and then flips me with ease. And I felt it. I felt that power, and just having no control, and being power bombed, and that was such a weird feeling. I was like, man, that's some crazy strength right there.
He was as strong as they come. I don't think anybody's ever beaten him in an arm wrestling match. Junior high football, practice, he would be running the ball as a running back. There'd be 2-3 guys trying to wrap around his legs, take him down, and he was on a different level. He was a strong man, strong guy, strong kid at that time. But another guy didn't want to mess with him, for sure.
Yeah. How do you feel about AJ Styles' retirement and how they handled that?
If this is what he wanted, if he didn't want to have the full kind of send off, then that's fine. I just felt like it was a little bit all of a sudden. The Rumble's kind of a weird time to write somebody off. But then when you look back at the last year, he did have, he had matches with Cena, matches with Balor and Nakamura and these guys, and it's good for Gunther, obviously, to get that under his belt. I was kind of hoping that there would be some shenanigans and it would extend to WrestleMania. That way Gunther would have a big WrestleMania match, and then Styles could go out then. But he's one of those guys, AJ, that when I dipped out of wrestling for a while, when the TNA started picking up steam and people, were calling and saying, hey, have you watched TNA? They got this AJ Styles, they got Samoa Joe, Kurt Angle's coming over, is over here, check it out. And then you saw some Amazing Red. I started getting big into it again because of TNA, and AJ Styles was, definitely, I thought the top guy there with Samoa Joe. And I thought for a while, TNA was better than WWE up until Bischoff and Hogan kind of came in, and then they kind of fell off a little bit. But love AJ Styles. Hopefully he stays around in a backstage capacity and helps, the next generation, because he's a true professional.
I interviewed AJ Styles February of 2002. So this was before Ring of Honor. This was before TNA. And he was fresh off of WCW, who had closed the previous year. And, he didn't get much of a run there. He went there and then they closed. So this was the Super 8 tournament in Delaware, and I was doing all the backstage interviews. So I got to interview the Amazing Red. I interviewed Bobby Roode. I interviewed AJ Styles, Donovan Morgan, and just some of the moves that AJ pulled out that night. I remember he did a shooting star press from the top rope to the floor outside, and he was just doing some crazy stuff. And I knew at that moment, man, this guy is going to be something special. And he just came off of a pay-per-view too at that time. It was a standalone pay-per-view, the WWA, which I believe was Australia. And he was in a big 6-man cruiserweight tag. So he was really making a name for himself early on, but you knew right away that he was going to be something special.
And you always have that fear when they go to WWE that they're not gonna use him the right way, or they're not gonna give him take him seriously, because this was during the Vince era. But he debuted at that Rumble, crowd went crazy, and he got, I think for most of his run, I think he was treated the way he deserved to be treated, as a top tier guy. And he did when he was a champion on SmackDown, I thought that was a good period, a good run of shows for SmackDown for a while there, when he was even when it was like him and James Ellsworth. I enjoyed all that stuff. I think his run as a champion on SmackDown, I thought, was one of the better times for that show. and I'm glad that he got a chance to go to WWE and do it on the biggest stage, because he deserves that.
And we talked about how WWF had the relationship with Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the USWA back in the 90s. And now you see them with the relationship with TNA. And of course, now they have overtaken AAA. You know, what are your thoughts on the whole AAA process so far and their relationship with TNA?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that TNA got a nice TV deal after, they got that nice TV deal with AMC now. So I feel like it's benefited them. Obviously, it's going to benefit WWE because they're going to end up taking talent from there. You see with Jordan Grace and some of these other stars. I think Mike Santana eventually will be over there. So I think it's worked for both. I think it's beneficial for both, where maybe back in the old days it wouldn't be. And then the AAA aspect I like, because it's giving guys a platform that don't get a lot of television time. For some reason, Chad Gable doesn't get on TV as much as he should, but with his current character, he's on. You see him in Kaiser, wrestling on AAA. It gives Dominic Mysterio more exposure, more chance to do his thing and just kind of work his craft. And it brings that the lucha libre style. If you remember with WCW Nitro, that was a big that first segment of Nitro every week was a cruiserweight lucha inspired type of match, and people liked it. So I'm glad to see it back in the fold. And I think like Vikingo, that guy, it's cool to see him somewhat loosely affiliated with WWE by doing AAA matches. You didn't think that was going to happen. So I think it's good as long as it's beneficial to both and not just to WWE. And I feel like it so far has been beneficial to both.
You said you're a big Kenny Omega guy. Are you an AEW guy in general?
I am. So I honestly don't watch AEW as much now as I did when they first came out. Those first few years, I really loved it. Like I was really into it. I think they have great matches. I think they have too many titles and maybe even too much talent. I would, I know they have a lot of different titles. I would have liked to see them do, because I know Tony Khan, he loves New Japan. I'd love to see like a junior heavyweight division in AEW as opposed to all these other secondary titles. That way you could kind of differentiate the talent, and you could have your Jack Perry's and Ricochet's in the junior heavyweight division. And then, you see Samoa Joe and, Speedball Bailey have a 20-minute match, and it's kind of like, and Speedball Bailey's a great athlete or whatever. He's a great athlete, but it's not very believable to me that he's going to last 20 minutes in there with Joe. So I wish they had some I wish they differentiated the weight classes there, because I just feel like there's a big gap between, and it's a way that you could get some separation without doing like a full roster split. So you have your big guys, you have your Moxleys and your Adam Pages and MJF's going for the world title, but some of the younger guys like a Bailey or a Kenny Knight, let those guys go for like a junior heavyweight title. I mean, Finn Balor, I think that put Finn Balor, on the map in Japan, and he's one of the most respected wrestlers, in the world. So I would like to see that, but I know they've had, I know it's Tony Khan's company, so people criticize him, but it's like, it's his company. If this is how he wants to do it, God bless him. It's helping a lot of people. He's putting a lot of food on the table for a lot of families of wrestlers. And if he wants to have full control of everything, and if he's not interested in really, his family has money, so he's not interested in making every last dollar. So if this is how he wants to do it, that's fine. And, you got great talent there. I love MJF. Love Will. I think Will Ospreay is probably the best wrestler on the planet right now. I hope he gets healthy and has a healthy career. But I enjoy AEW, and great pay-per-views, a little long, but I think they could just cut them down by about a half hour or an hour, and they'll be better. But yeah, what are your thoughts on? Are you an AEW guy?
I gave him a shot early on, and I was, it was pretty enjoyable early on. But the guys that I really liked was Cody Rhodes and Jericho and CM Punk, and I've never been a big Young Bucks guy, and I know they've been a big part of it. But so once all those guys left, I kind of naturally lost interest. I got back into it a couple of times. I'm happy they're there. They're important, to have that competition. It's important to have another place for wrestlers to go. They're high profile. They're, I would say they're bigger than what TNA was, even in TNA's initial run. So AEW is, big, which is a great thing for the business. And plus their contracts are very lucrative. They've got endless money. So it's great for the talent. And like you said, their families. So that is awesome. But I dip in and out. You know, a lot of it's not for me. They have tons of great talent, but I feel that the storylines don't always follow through. They
Yeah.
just kind of start up and then they disappear, and then you don't know what's going on, and they don't know what's going on, and that's how it comes off anyway. And then, like you said, with the championships, I mean, you know, everybody and their mother has a championship. It doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like, oh, okay, you know, that's cool,
If
but
if everybody's a champion, then nobody's a champion. It's too much, too
yeah,
much overkill there.
just tighten it up a little bit, and like you said, shorten some of the pay-per-views. You know, All In I get every year. That's the one pay-per-view I get it every year. It's always in Wembley Stadium or whatever, and you know, it's always enjoyable. And obviously that's a little longer, but that's their WrestleMania. um but I don't think that their other pay-per-views should be real long. It just doesn't, it's too much, and they try to fit. That's the other thing, there are too many. You know, less is more. You know,
Yes.
so if you have a 6-man tag to open up the show, well, the third match in shouldn't be a 10-man tag. You know, and then
Absolutely.
maybe a fatal 4-way tag team match, you know, the 8th match in. You know, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
there's just
It's
too
like,
many
yeah.
multi-man matches, and it's too many people. Like, we get you have a lot of talent, but split it up a little bit.
And the card doesn't really build. The card doesn't really build. Back in the old days, the opening couple matches, 7 or 8 would be 7, 8 minute matches where, lower card guys in there. Now it's like they start the show off with main event guys in the first match, lighting each other's hair on fire. Well, by the time you get to the main event, there's not really anything left to do because everything's been done in the first 11 matches. I kind of like the old school. Let's build the card up, and then the matches get more important as the show goes on, as opposed to start off with a huge match and end with a huge match. But that's just the way I like it. But
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, it's a good thing, I think, for the business, like I said. And, you know, it's great to have competition. It's great to have all that talent, just as long as they kind of tighten it up a little bit and make sure that everybody shines. And I just want the storylines to, follow through. And I feel like that doesn't always happen. So
need a payoff. Yeah.
that's the most important for me. So real quick, Hall of Fame, who do you think deserves Hall of Fame that's not in there yet? Anybody in mind?
Ooh, that's a good one. I had heard a rumor that I guess Demolition kind of made peace with WWE, hopefully. So I think that's definitely a team that definitely deserves to be in there. This would be a good year for that. But yeah, outside of that, I'm not much coming to my head right now. What about you? I would say Demolition would definitely be my number one, just because, like I said, they were probably the quintessential WWF 80s tag team, the number one team of that era.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Demolition, one of my favorites. If they don't go in, I could see maybe Rick Martel going in this year. I think Rick Martel deserves it. Tag team champions, multiple times. Then the model gimmick was very over, and of course, Strike Force. So he's done a lot of big things. So Martel definitely deserves it. Demolition just signed a Legends deal about a year ago. So I think it's definitely on their radar to make that the next step. They've got the figures, they've got different things happening. So hopefully that comes to fruition, because they definitely deserve it. And I don't know, other than Martel and Demolition, I think Tony Gurria himself deserves it, for sure. Those are some of the people that I'm hoping for in, more recent years.
So you think they'll do Stephanie McMahon?
Yeah, they already announced it.
Oh, did they? I missed that. Okay. All right. I knew Triple H last year. I didn't know if they were going to do Stephanie this year. Okay.
Yeah, they announced her as the first inductee. Undertaker introduced her.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so she's going to be the first inductee, and then I don't know. I would imagine she's going to be the headliner.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to see who else goes in this year. Demolition and Stephanie McMahon. That's an interesting combination.
Yeah.
Might have to don Crush's paint. The third Demolition.
That was great. Yeah. That was. I remember that the 3-man Demolition.
Yep.
Hiding underneath the ring.
Absolutely. So let's talk about rewind back to Riverside, Rhode Island. Let's get back to Riverside. Candidacy for Ward 4, East Providence City Council. You're going for it, and I think that honestly, there's really no better person. You know what I mean? Like for Riverside, you're you're a piece of Riverside history in many ways, but I think when a lot of people think of Riverside, they think of Jason Botelho. So, why don't you tell us all about it? What inspired you to go for it? When that all goes down for you, and what you'd like to see amongst the changes in Riverside or additions in Riverside or whatever it may be.
Okay, thanks. So I appreciate the kind words. Very nice. As you know, lifelong resident of East Providence. I just love the city, love the town, love Riverside, the area of East Providence. Riverside's part of East Providence. So Ward 4 city council position, you're basically the representative from Riverside on the city council. There's 5 seats on the council. You got one from Riverside, 2 from the center of East Providence, 1 from Rumford, and then 1 at large, which encompasses all of East Providence. A couple of years ago, I've always loved politics more on the national level than the local level, but I've always been interested in politics. And I joined a couple of committees. A couple of years ago, I was a friend of mine, Chris Clancy. He's the uncle of my friend Jay Clancy, uncle of Neil and Justin Mercier. He wanted me to get involved with these committees. So I got involved and started to see kind of how the local politics works. And there's good and bad. We do good work. We were able to provide, we've been able every year, we provide meals for families in need for Thanksgiving, for Christmas. We put on some events for the town with some funds that we raised at our golf tournament. So I kind of got more into it, started following the local politics, every city council meetings on YouTube, started following that. I started thinking last year, probably like last fall, maybe I might want to, this is something I want to do. And I knew this year was an election year. I thought about it. At the time, the current city councilman had been telling people he wasn't going to run for re-election. He was done. So I knew there was going to be a spot opening. So I thought about it. About November, I made up my mind. That's what got me back on Facebook, because I knew if I wanted to be in politics, you need Facebook to communicate with people. So about November, I decided to get back on Facebook, because at that point I knew I was going to run. I didn't want to announce it in November because I was still a year out. So I'm like, that's too far ahead. It's the holidays. Let people, we'll do it after the new year. Well, after the new year, the current councilman decided that he is going to, or maybe towards the end of the year last year, he decided that he is going to run again. So I do have an opponent. He is the current city councilman from Ward 4. So I'm in the challenger role here against the champion. So, I got to work a little bit harder. I got to get my name out there in the political circles, go do just old school grassroots. I'm just going to go door to door, knock on people's doors, kind of explain to them what I'm about. Local politics, kind of like pro wrestling, where you have this small online community that's very divisive, very negative, and they're never going to be happy. No matter what you do, they will not be happy. But they think that they speak for everybody. And the more you get out there in the city and talk to people, the more you realize they don't. It's just the negative ones are the ones that really like to speak out and complain and make us stink. That's kind of what got me off of Facebook years ago to begin with. It's just the constant negativity. And you see at the local level, and my feeling, what I want to do is, listen, at the national level, politics is very divisive. Republicans, Democrats, very divisive. I'm not going to be able to fix that. But at the local level, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, we all want the same thing. We all want a safe East Providence. We want a clean city. We want our tax dollars to be spent wisely, efficiently. We want to know where they're going. We want to have good schools. We don't want them to be overcrowded. We want pretty much mostly we want the same things. One of the big issues in East Providence is housing. There is a housing shortage, and there are a lot of people that don't want to see any housing built at all in East Providence, and it's one of those things that you kind of got to balance it. I don't think it's an all or nothing thing, because to grow a tax base of a city, housing is one of the best ways that you can grow your tax base, by adding additional housing, more people paying taxes. Because if you think about it, the bills that our taxes are, the budget for the city is going to always increase because things are always going to cost money. So I think if you need to expand the base of housing a little bit, to try to bring in some more money for the city, and help people. Some people that are older people that are in houses that are too big for them, give them an option, some new housing that might be smaller for them to want to move into now that they don't have kids, or their kids are all grown up. So it's a touchy thing that you got to be delicate. You don't want to, we want to preserve all our historical landmarks. We want to keep the landscape. We don't want to change the landscape of our city. So it's one of those things when it comes to housing, people are either all against it or all for it. I feel like we have to we need some more housing, but we need to just be responsible about it. And we can't, throw up 100-unit buildings in every corner. But I think there are some opportunities, especially with vacant property that's not being used for anything right now. It's just sitting there empty. So the land's already cleared out. I think those are great opportunities for some housing to meet the housing demand that exists in East Providence and all of Rhode Island. So that's just kind of the basics. And I'm willing to listen to people. I'll listen to people on any side of the, I don't really care what your political background is. If you have a suggestion that you think can improve the way the city runs, I'd love to hear from you. I want to work together, and I want new voices to be heard. I feel like there's kind of a small segment of the population that makes the most noise, and then their concerns, the ones that get addressed. And I feel like the rest of the city gets ignored sometimes on certain things. So I want to hear from different people. I want to get younger people. I think it's important that younger people get involved, because the decisions that get made today at the city council level are going to impact 10, 20 years down the line. So I want to see some young people get involved, and they are usually the ones that their young people have some great ideas about housing needs and about transportation as far as bike lanes and things like that. So I hope to get the younger crowd involved, and I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of work, but if I want to win, I know I have to work hard. It's not going to be easy for sure.
Well, hopefully you take a page out of Cody Rhodes' book and finish the story, Jay.
Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan.
Well, I wish you the best of luck on your journey to City Council, Ward 4, Riverside representing. That would be great. So best of luck for
that. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
And Jay, thank you so much for taking the time and being here today, going down memory lane a little bit.
Always a pleasure to talk. Always a pleasure to go down memory lane with you, Joe. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. For Jason Botelho, I'm Joseph Bruen, and this has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, what you thought of this episode and what you'd like to see in future episodes. And we will see you all next time.
Thanks, Joe.